Clara May Thornton dropped to her knees in the snow, her fingers clawing at the frozen ground where wagon tracks disappeared into nothing. Her 7-year-old daughter stood behind her, shivering, watching her mother fall apart for the first and last time. "Mama, where did Papa go?" Clara couldn't answer. The man she'd married, the father of her child, had just driven away with everything they owned: food, blankets, shelter, leaving them to die in the Montana wilderness. He'd called them mistakes. She'd prove him wrong. If you want to see how this mother and daughter survived the impossible, subscribe to our channel and stay until the end. Comment the city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The wagon was still close enough to catch. Clara May Thornton knew this with the desperate certainty of a woman watching her life disappear over a ridge. She could run, she could scream, she could beg, but her husband hadn't looked back once. "Mama?" Rosie Bell tugged at her mother's skirt. "Mama, why is Papa leaving?" Clara's throat closed around words she couldn't speak. Her hands shook, not from cold, though the December wind cut through her thin dress like a blade. They shook from the realization that everything she'd believed for 8 years had been a lie. Emmett Thornton had planned this. She saw it now with terrible clarity. The way he'd suggested she and Rosie stretch their legs while he watered the horses. The way he'd asked her to check if there were any berries on that bush yonder. The way he'd waited until she was far enough from the wagon that she couldn't reach it in time. "Emmett!" The name tore from her chest. "Emmett!" The wagon kept moving. The canvas cover, the one she'd patched with her own hands during their courtship, swayed gently as the horses pulled it further away. "Emmett Thornton, you come back here!" Nothing. Rosie's small hand found hers. "Mama, you're scaring me." Clara forced herself to stop screaming. She looked down at her daughter, 7 years old, dark hair like her father's, wide brown eyes like her own. Rosie wore a dress Clara had sewn from flour sacks, pretty enough with the blue flowers she'd embroidered along the hem. No coat, no boots thick enough for snow. They'd been airing the blankets when Emmett made his decision. One thin wool blanket hung from a bush 10 feet away, the only possession he'd left behind. "Mama?" Rosie's voice trembled. "Is Papa coming back?" Clara knelt in the snow, ignoring the cold that immediately soaked through her skirt. She cupped her daughter's face in both hands. "Listen to me, Rosie Bell. Listen good." "Yes, ma'am." "Your Papa—" Clara's voice cracked. She steadied it through sheer will. "Your Papa has gone away." "When is he coming back?" "He ain't coming back, sweet girl." Rosie's lip quivered. "Did I do something wrong? Did I make him mad?" Clara pulled her daughter against her chest so hard that Rosie gasped. "No. You hear me? This ain't nothing you did. This ain't nothing I did. Your Papa made a choice, and that choice says everything about him and nothing about us." "But Mama—" "Nothing about us, Rosie. You understand?" Rosie nodded against her mother's shoulder, though Clara knew she didn't understand. How could she? Clara barely understood it herself. She held her daughter for a long moment, feeling the small body shake with cold and confusion. Then she stood, took Rosie's hand, and walked to retrieve the blanket. One blanket. That's what Emmett had left them. One blanket, the clothes on their backs, and each other. Clara wrapped the blanket around Rosie's shoulders, tucking the edges tight. "Better?" "A little." Rosie clutched the wool to her chin. "Mama, I'm hungry." Of course she was. They hadn't eaten since morning, and morning felt like a lifetime ago. "I know, sweet girl. We're going to figure that out." "How?" Clara looked at the horizon where the wagon had vanished. Then she turned and looked the other direction, back the way they'd come. 15 miles to the last settlement, maybe more. She looked ahead, 30 miles to the next town, according to what Emmett had said. Emmett, who was probably a liar about everything. "Mama?" Rosie's voice pulled her back. "What are we going to do?" Clara closed her eyes. Her father's voice came to her from somewhere deep in memory, a voice she hadn't heard in 12 years, not since the fever took him. Survival ain't about being strong, Clara May. It's about being stubborn. You just keep taking the next step, then the next one, then the next one after that. Eventually, you find yourself on the other side of whatever's trying to kill you. She opened her eyes. We're going to take a walk, Rosie Belle. Where? Clara pointed north, toward a limestone cliff face she'd noticed the evening before. There'd been a shadow there, a dark mouth in the rock that might have been a cave. That way. What's that way? I don't know yet. Clara squeezed her daughter's hand. But we're gonna find out. The walk should have taken 20 minutes. It took nearly 2 hours. Snow had drifted deep in the low places, and Rosie's legs were too short to push through. Clara carried her when she could, set her down when her arms gave out, then picked her up again. Tell me a story, Mama. Clara's lungs burned. Her arms ached. But she understood what Rosie was really asking for. Not entertainment, but distraction. Something to hold on to while their world fell apart. You want to hear about the farm again? Yes, ma'am. Well, Clara shifted Rosie higher on her hip. When I was your age, we had a barn cat named Patches. Ugliest thing you ever saw. Orange and white and black, all splotchy, with one ear that drooped and one that stood straight up. Why was her ear droopy? Got in a fight with a raccoon, my daddy said. But Patches won. She won? She sure did. And after that, weren't no raccoon ever came near our barn again. They knew better. Rosie giggled, a small sound, almost swallowed by the wind, but it was real. Clara held on to it like a lifeline. What else? Patches had kittens every spring, 6, 7, sometimes 8 at a time. My sisters and I would name every single one, and we'd cry when Daddy gave them away to the neighbors. But he always let us keep one. Which one did you keep? The runt, every time. The smallest one, the one nobody else wanted. I'd carry it around in my apron pocket, feed it milk with a rag, keep it warm against my belly at night. Did they live, the runts? Clara thought of all those tiny creatures she'd loved so fiercely. Some had lived, some hadn't. Life on a farm taught you early that love didn't guarantee survival. But survival didn't mean anything without love. Most of them, she said, most of them lived just fine. The cliff face loomed closer. The shadow Clara had spotted was indeed a cave. The entrance tall and wide, darker than she'd hoped, but promising shelter from the wind that had started to bite harder. Is that where we're going? Rosie asked. Yes, sweet girl. That's going to be our home for a while. A cave? A cave. Rosie considered this. Are there bears in caves? Clara's stomach tightened. She hadn't thought about bears, or mountain lions, or wolves. We're going to check real careful before we go in, she said. And if there's anything in there that don't belong, we'll chase it right out. How? By being scarier than it is. Rosie laughed again, louder this time. You're not scary, Mama. Clara set her daughter down at the cave entrance. She straightened her spine, squared her shoulders, and made her face as hard as she could make it. I am now. The cave was empty. Clara checked every corner, every shadow, every crevice deep enough to hide something with teeth. She found old bones, rabbit, maybe deer, and droppings that had dried out long ago. Nothing fresh, nothing living. Whatever had used this place before had moved on. It's safe? Rosie hovered at the entrance, the blanket clutched around her shoulders. It's safe. Come on in. Rosie stepped inside and immediately stopped. It's warmer. She was right. The cave blocked the wind, and the stone held whatever heat it had absorbed from warmer days. It wasn't warm exactly, but it wasn't deadly cold either. We're going to make it warmer, Clara said. Help me gather some leaves. They worked together as the afternoon light faded, piling dried leaves and pine needles into a corner of the cave to create a nest of sorts. Clara positioned it away from the entrance, where the wind couldn't reach, and near enough to the back wall that the stone might offer some protection. When they finished, she settled Rosie into the nest and wrapped the blanket around both of them. Mama? Yes, sweet girl? My belly hurts. Clara's heart clenched. I know. Mine too. Are we gonna die? The question hung in the cold air. Rosie asked it the way children ask questions, directly, without the social niceties that teach adults to dance around hard truths. Clara took her daughter's face in her hands again. Look at me, Rosie Belle. Rosie looked. We ain't gonna die. You hear me? We ain't gonna die because I won't let us. I will find food. I will find water. I will find warmth. And I will keep you safe until we figure out what comes next. How do you know? Because I'm your mama, and there ain't nothing in this world stronger than a mama protecting her child. Rosie studied her mother's face for a long moment. Then she nodded. Okay, Mama. Okay. They huddled together as darkness fell, sharing what warmth their bodies could generate. Clara didn't sleep. She listened to the wind howl past the cave entrance, listened to Rosie's breathing slowly even out as exhaustion claimed her. And she thought about fire. Fire would save them. But she had no flint, no steel, no matches. Nothing but wood and stone and her own 2 hands. You just keep taking the next step, then the next one, then the next one after that. Fire tomorrow. Tonight, they would survive on stubbornness alone. Morning came gray and bitter. Clara extracted herself from the blanket nest without waking Rosie. She stood at the cave entrance and studied the world outside. Snow-covered hills, skeletal trees, a sky the color of old pewter. No wagon, no horses, no Emmett. Good. She realized, standing there in the weak morning light, that she'd been waiting for him to come back. Some foolish part of her heart had expected him to return, shamefaced and apologetic, claiming he'd had a moment of madness. But Emmett hadn't had a moment of madness. Emmett had spoken calmly, rationally, without a trace of emotion. I never wanted this life, either of you. You were both mistakes I'm done paying for. Mistakes. Clara looked back at Rosie, still sleeping in the nest of leaves. That beautiful child, with her curious mind and her brave spirit and her endless capacity for love. A mistake? Number Clara turned back to the entrance. She'd made plenty of mistakes in her life. Trusting Emmett was one of them. Believing his promises. Following him west when every instinct told her to stay in Ohio with her sisters. But Rosie wasn't a mistake. Rosie was the only good thing that had come from 8 years of marriage to a man who'd never really wanted her. And Clara would die before she let Emmett's cruelty define her daughter's life. Mama? She turned. Rosie was sitting up, rubbing her eyes with small fists. Good morning, sweet girl. I'm hungry. I know. Come here. Rosie stumbled over, still wrapped in the blanket. Clara knelt and took her daughter's hands. We've got work to do today. What kind of work? The surviving kind. You ready? Rosie straightened her shoulders in an unconscious imitation of her mother. Yes, ma'am. That's my girl. Fire. Clara had watched her father make fire once, when she was barely older than Rosie. A thunderstorm had left everything wet, and Pa had muttered something about flint being useless when you needed it most. He'd gathered dry wood from under the barn overhang. He'd carved a small board and a spindle. He'd worked for what seemed like hours, spinning the spindle between his palms, pressing it down into the board until smoke curled up, and then, miracle of miracles, an ember glowed red in the gathered dust. She remembered the ember. She remembered her father's triumphant grin. She remembered thinking it looked easy. It was not easy. Clara's first attempt snapped the spindle in half. Her second produced no heat at all. Her third made her palms blister, and she had to stop when blood began mixing with the sawdust. "Mama, you're bleeding." "I know, sweet girl." "Does it hurt?" "Yes." Rosie's face crumpled. "I don't want you to hurt." Clara stopped what she was doing. She gathered Rosie close, bloody hands and all. "Listen to me. Some things worth having cost something. Fire is worth having. Fire means warmth. Fire means food we can cook. Fire means we live instead of die. So yes, it hurts. And I'm going to keep going anyway." "Why?" "Because you're worth the hurt, Rosie Bell. You're worth any hurt." She went back to work. Hours passed. Clara's hands went from blistered to bleeding to numb. She talked while she worked, keeping rhythm with the rotation of the spindle. Stories about the farm, about her sisters, about the barn cat Patches and the runts she'd saved. Rosie dragged in kindling without being asked. She gathered dry leaves and shredded bark. She watched her mother with faith that Clara wasn't sure she deserved. When smoke finally rose from the fireboard, Clara's voice caught in her throat. "Rosie, Rosie, look." They both stared at the tiny wisp curling upward from the carved depression. Clara kept the spindle moving, afraid to stop, afraid to hope. The wood dust glowed. "The bark!" Clara gasped. "Hand me the bark!" Rosie pushed the nest of shredded bark close. With hands that shook from exhaustion and pain and desperate hope, Clara transferred the glowing ember into the tinder. She bent close, blew gently. The ember brightened, dimmed, brightened again. Smoke thickened. A tiny flame licked at the bark. "Mama!" "I see it, sweet girl. I see it." More flames. The bark caught. The fire spread to the twigs Rosie had gathered. Within minutes, they had a real fire. Crackling, popping, radiating warmth that pushed back the darkness and the cold. Clara sat back and wept. She didn't try to stop the tears. They came from somewhere too deep to control. Grief for the marriage she'd lost. Rage at the man who'd betrayed her. Terror for what still lay ahead. And fierce, consuming pride because she'd done this impossible thing. Rosie crawled into her lap. "Don't cry, Mama. Sometimes crying is okay, sweet girl. Sometimes you have to let the hurt out so it don't poison you from the inside." "Are you poisoned?" "Not anymore." Clara wiped her face with the back of her hand, leaving streaks of blood and tears and ash. "Not anymore." They sat together before the fire, absorbing the heat and the light. The cave walls flickered with shadows that danced like living things. The smoke curled up toward the ceiling and found its way out through cracks Clara hadn't noticed before. "Mama?" "Yes, Rosie? Are we going to be okay?" Clara looked at the fire. She looked at her daughter. She looked at her own bloodied, blistered, unbroken hands. "Yes," she said, "we're going to be okay." And for the first time since Emmett drove away, she believed it. Night fell again, but this time The darkness held no terror. The fire burned steady, fed by wood Rosie had gathered and arranged just so, following instructions Clara gave with a precision that came from somewhere outside herself. Instinct, maybe, or the ghost of her father's voice in her memory. They had warmth. They didn't have food, but they had warmth, and that was enough for now. "Mama?" "Yes, sweet girl. Tell me about what we're going to do tomorrow." Clara considered the question. She could lie, make promises she wasn't sure she could keep, or she could tell the truth and risk frightening her daughter. She chose something in between. "Tomorrow we're going to find food." "How?" "I'm going to make traps, like the ones my daddy used for rabbits when times were lean." "Have you ever made traps before?" "No." Clara pulled Rosie closer. "But I watched my daddy do it, and I'm a fast learner." "What if you can't catch anything?" "Then I'll try again, and again, and again, until I do." Rosie was quiet for a moment. Then, "Mama?" "Yes?" "I'm glad you're my mama." Clara's throat tightened. "I'm glad you're my daughter." "Even though Papa said we were mistakes?" The words hit Clara like a physical blow. She hadn't realized Rosie had heard. She'd hoped, foolishly, that her daughter had missed Emmett's final cruelty. She turned Rosie to face her, firelight playing across both their faces. "Listen to me, Rosie Bell Thornton. Listen good, because I'm only going to say this once." Rosie's eyes went wide. "Yes, ma'am." "Your papa was wrong. Dead wrong. There ain't nothing about you that's a mistake. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. The best thing I ever did. The only thing I ever did that mattered." "But Papa said—" "Papa was a coward and a liar. He left because he was weak. Because when things got hard, he ran. That's not what strong people do. Strong people stay. Strong people fight. Strong people protect the ones they love, no matter what." "Are you strong, Mama?" Clara thought of her bleeding hands, her aching arms, the fire she'd made from nothing but wood and will. "I'm getting stronger every day, and so are you." Rosie nodded slowly. "Okay, Mama." "Okay?" "Okay." They held each other as the fire crackled and the wind howled, and the cold pressed against the cave entrance like a living thing trying to get in. Clara didn't sleep much that night either, but this time it wasn't fear that kept her awake. It was planning. The next morning, Clara rose with the sun. She checked the fire, still burning, thank God, and added more wood. She studied her hands, which had scabbed over during the night. They hurt, but they worked. Good enough. "Rosie," she touched her daughter's shoulder. "Time to wake up." Rosie stirred, rubbed her eyes, and sat up. "Is it morning?" "It's morning, and we've got work to do." "The traps?" "The traps." Clara had spent the night thinking about the snares her father used to make. Wire loops suspended in rabbit runs, triggered by the animal's movement. Simple in theory, brutal in practice. She didn't have wire, but she did have something else. "Come here, sweet girl. I need your help with something." Rosie watched with fascination as Clara removed her corset, the undergarment she'd worn every day since she was 14, the one piece of her old life that remained. The stays were thin metal, flexible but strong. "What are you doing, Mama?" "Making something useful out of something useless." She pried the stays free, one by one, bending and shaping them with stones she'd collected from the cave floor. The metal resisted, but Clara was more stubborn than any piece of wire. By midday, she had 6 snares. "Now," she said to Rosie, "let's go hunting." Clara had never read tracks before. Not really. But she'd watched her father do it 100 times. crouching in the Ohio mud and pointing out the signs that told a story. See those prints? That's a rabbit. They hop, so the back feet land in front of the front feet. And see how the tracks lead from this brush pile to that tree? That's a run. Rabbits use the same paths over and over. She knelt in the snow outside the cave, studying the marks left by creatures she couldn't see. What are you looking for, Mama? Patterns. Rabbits are creatures of habit. They like to use the same paths, feel safe in familiar places. If we can find where they run, we can put our traps there. How do you know all this? My daddy taught me. Was your daddy smart? Clara smiled, the first real smile she'd felt in days. The smartest man I ever knew. They found a rabbit run 30 yards from the cave, a narrow path between two rocks where the snow had been packed down by repeated use. Clara set her first snare there, careful to position the loop at the right height, anchor the wire securely to a buried branch. She set the other 5 snares along similar paths, each one a small prayer disguised as twisted metal. Now what? Rosie asked. Now we wait. The first snare caught nothing. The second caught nothing. The third and fourth, nothing. The fifth caught a rabbit by the hind leg. Clara found it the next morning, half frozen, still struggling weakly against the wire. She killed it quickly, whispering an apology as the light faded from its eyes. I'm sorry. Thank you. I'm sorry. When she returned to the cave, Rosie looked at the limp body in her mother's hands with a mixture of wonder and horror. Is that dinner? That's dinner. It's dead. It is. Rosie's face was unreadable. Did you kill it? Clara knelt so she could look her daughter in the eyes. Yes, sweet girl, I killed it. And I'll kill more if I have to, because keeping you alive is more important than anything else in this world. Does it hurt, killing things? Clara considered the question. Not my hands, but something in here, she touched her chest, feels it. And I think that's okay. I think we're supposed to feel it. It means we ain't forgot what it costs to live. Rosie nodded slowly. Okay, Mama. Okay. Clara skinned the rabbit that afternoon, her first attempt at something she'd never done before. The work was harder than she'd imagined, messier, more intimate. But she persisted, cutting and pulling and scraping until she had meat and a pelt that might, eventually, provide some small measure of warmth. They ate their first real meal that night, roasted rabbit, charred in places, raw in others, the best thing Clara had ever tasted. Rosie ate with the focused intensity of a child who'd been hungry for too long. She cleaned the bones, sucked the marrow, licked her fingers. More? Tomorrow, sweet girl. We'll catch more tomorrow. Rosie nodded. Then she curled against her mother's side, full for the first time in days, and fell asleep in seconds. Clara watched the fire and stroked her daughter's hair. They'd made it through another day. Tomorrow, there would be more challenges, more dangers, more work to do. But tonight, in this cave they'd claimed, warmed by fire they'd created, fed by food they'd caught, Clara May Thornton and her daughter were alive. And that was enough. 3 weeks passed, and Clara learned to read the wilderness like her mother had once read the family Bible, with patience, reverence, and the understanding that survival depended on paying attention. The snares caught rabbits with increasing regularity. Clara's hands grew calloused where they'd once been soft. Rosie learned to tend the fire without being asked, adding wood in small amounts, keeping the flames steady through the long, cold nights. They were surviving. But Clara knew surviving wasn't the same as living. Mama, look! Rosie stood at the cave entrance, pointing towards something in the snow. Clara set down the rabbit pelt she'd been scraping and crossed to her daughter's side. Tracks. Not rabbit, not fox, not deer. Boot prints. Clara's blood went cold.
"Get back from the entrance," she said quietly. "Now." "But Mama—"
"Now, Rosie." Rosie retreated into the shadows. Clara grabbed the sharpest stone she'd been using as a skinning tool. Pathetic as a weapon, but better than nothing. The boot prints led toward the cave. Recent. The edges hadn't yet softened from wind or new snowfall. Someone had been here. Someone might still be close. Clara pressed herself against the cave wall, stone raised, heart pounding so loud she was certain it could be heard for miles. Minutes passed. Nothing moved. Then she saw it. A bundle, left just outside the entrance. Cloth wrapped around something bulky, tied with rough twine. A trap? A trick? Clara waited another 10 minutes before she dared to retrieve it. She poked it first with a long stick, half expecting it to explode or spring open with teeth. Nothing happened. She dragged it inside and unwrapped it with trembling fingers. Salt pork, a small sack of flour, dried beans, a steel knife with a worn wooden handle, and a note scratched on a piece of bark. Saw your smoke. Figured you might need supplies. Don't mean no harm. No signature. "Who left it, Mama?" Rosie peered over her shoulder. "I don't know. Is it safe to eat?" Clara looked at the food. More than they'd had in weeks. Enough to last days, if she was careful. Her stomach cramped with hunger. Rosie's face was thinner than it should be, her cheekbones too sharp for a 7-year-old. "I don't know," Clara said again. But they ate anyway. What choice did they have? That night, Clara slept with the knife in her hand and one eye on the entrance. Whoever had left those supplies knew where they were. Knew they were alone. Knew they were vulnerable. She didn't trust kindness from strangers. Emmett had taught her that trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. 4 days later, another bundle appeared. This time, Clara was watching. She'd taken to sitting near the entrance during the gray morning hours, wrapped in rabbit furs, waiting. She saw him come out of the tree line, a tall figure in a heavy coat, moving with the careful, deliberate gait of a man who knew how to walk in snow. He carried something under one arm. Clara gripped her knife. The man stopped about 20 yards from the cave. He set down his bundle, straightened, and looked directly at the entrance. He knew she was watching. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then the man raised one hand, not a wave, just an acknowledgement, and turned back toward the trees. "Wait!" The word left Clara's mouth before she could stop it. The man paused. "Who are you?" He turned back. Even at this distance, she could see he was older than Emmett. Late 30s, maybe 40. Dark beard streaked with gray. Eyes she couldn't read. "Name's Josiah McAllister," he called back. "Got a cabin about 3 miles west." "Why are you leaving food?" "Saw your smoke. Figured whoever was in that cave was either desperate or foolish. Either way, seemed like they could use help." "I don't need help." "No, ma'am, I can see that." He gestured at the cave, at the wind barrier Clara had constructed, at the organized camp she'd built from nothing. "You've done right well for yourself." "Then why keep coming?" Josiah was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. "Had a wife once. Lost her to fever 5 years back. Left me with a boy to raise alone." He paused. "I know what it's like to be on your own, with a child depending on you. Wouldn't wish that on anyone." Clara's grip on the knife didn't loosen. "I ain't looking for charity." "Ain't offering charity. Offering neighborly assistance. There's a difference." "What's the difference?" "Charity expects gratitude. Neighborly assistance just expects you to pass it on someday, if you're able. Clara studied him across the snow. He hadn't moved closer, hadn't pushed, hadn't done anything threatening. That somehow made her more suspicious. "You can leave the supplies," she said finally, "but I don't want company." "Understood." Josiah touched the brim of his hat. "You need anything, my cabin's due west. Follow the creek when the thaw comes. Can't miss it." He turned and walked away without looking back. Clara waited until he disappeared into the trees before she retrieved the bundle. More salt pork. Coffee. Actual coffee. A small pot for boiling water. And another note. "The boy's name is Samuel. He's 9. Gets lonely out here. If your daughter ever wants a playmate, she'd be welcome." Clara crumpled the note and threw it in the fire. She didn't need neighbors. Didn't need friends. Didn't need a man showing up with gifts and kind words and promises that would probably turn to ash like every other promise she'd ever believed. "Mama?" Rosie appeared at her elbow. "Who was that man?" "Nobody." "He looked nice."
Looking nice don't mean nothing.
"Is he gonna come back?" Clara stared at the fire, watching the note blacken and curl. "I hope not." But he did come back. A week later, then 3 days after that, then every few days, like clockwork. He never approached the cave directly, never pushed for conversation, just left his bundles and his notes and walked away. Clara stopped hiding when he came. She'd stand at the entrance, arms crossed, watching him with suspicion that she couldn't quite maintain. He always tipped his hat, always walked away. "You're stubborn," she told him one morning, when the silence between them had grown almost comfortable. "Yes, ma'am. Been told that a time or two." "Don't you have better things to do than trudge through snow to feed strangers?" "Probably." He set down his bundle. This time it included a pair of small boots that looked about Rosie's size. "But my boy asked about your daughter yesterday. Wanted to know if she was real or if I'd made her up." "You told him about us?" "Told him there was a brave woman and her little girl living in the old cave on Crow's Peak, making do with next to nothing, surviving better than most men could." Josiah met her eyes. "He thinks you're heroes." Clara's throat tightened. "We ain't heroes. We're just trying not to die." "That's what heroes do, ma'am. They keep going when giving up would be easier." He tipped his hat and walked away. Clara looked down at the boots. Good leather, sturdy soles. They would fit Rosie perfectly. "Damn you," she whispered. She didn't know if she was talking to Josiah or to herself. The day everything changed started like every other day. Cold, quiet, full of the small tasks that kept them alive. Clara was checking her trap lines when she heard Rosie scream. The sound cut through the winter air like a knife. Clara dropped the rabbit she'd been carrying and ran. She found Rosie pressed against the cave entrance, trembling. A man stood in front of her. Not Josiah. This man was shorter, rounder, dressed in a fine wool coat that had no business being in the wilderness. He held a piece of paper in one gloved hand. "There you are," the man said as Clara skidded to a stop. "I was just explaining to your daughter that she's trespassing." Clara positioned herself between the stranger and Rosie. "Who the hell are you?" "Virgil Cobb. I represent the Montana Territory Land Company." He smiled, showing teeth that were too white, too even. "And you, madam, are squatting on property that belongs to my employers." "This cave don't belong to nobody." "I'm afraid that's not accurate." Cobb unfolded his paper with a flourish. "This entire ridge, including your charming little cave, was purchased 6 months ago by the land company. We have plans for this area. Mining surveys. Potentially a railroad spur. He folded the paper again. Which means you need to leave. Clara's hands curled into fists. I ain't going nowhere. I don't think you understand your position. Cobb's smile didn't waver. You have no legal claim to this land. No deed, no rights whatsoever. I could have you removed by force if necessary. Try it. Something flickered in Cobb's eyes. Surprise, maybe, or annoyance. He wasn't used to being challenged. Madam, be reasonable. This is wilderness. No place for a woman and child. I'm sure there's a settlement nearby where you could find appropriate accommodations. I said I ain't going. Cobb studied her for a long moment. Then he tucked the paper back into his coat. You have 1 week. After that, I'll return with men who are considerably less patient than I am. He turned and walked away, leaving footprints in the snow like accusations. Mama? Rosie's voice shook. What are we going to do? Clara pulled her daughter close. Her mind raced. 1 week. 7 days to figure out how to fight a man with lawyers and money and the power to take everything they'd built. I don't know, sweet girl, but we ain't leaving. This is our home. What if he comes back with those men? Then we'll face them together. I'm scared. Clara knelt and took Rosie's face in her hands. I know. I'm scared too. But being scared don't mean we give up. It means we fight harder. Rosie nodded, though tears streaked her cheeks. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She sat by the fire, turning possibilities over in her mind. Run? Where would they go? Fight? With what? Sharp stones and determination? She needed help. The thought made her stomach turn. She'd spent weeks rejecting Josiah's kindness, building walls against exactly this kind of dependence. But Rosie's scared face kept floating in her memory. Her daughter deserved better than a mother too proud to ask for help. Before dawn, Clara made her decision. Stay here, she told Rosie. Keep the fire going. Don't let anyone in. Where are you going? To find our neighbor. She followed Josiah's directions, due west, following the frozen creek bed. The walk took nearly 2 hours in deep snow, and by the time she spotted his cabin, her legs burned and her lungs ached. The cabin was small but solid, smoke curling from a stone chimney. A boy sat on the porch, whittling something with a knife. He looked up when Clara approached. His eyes went wide. Pa! Pa! The cabin door banged open. Josiah emerged with a rifle in his hands, then stopped when he saw Clara. Mrs. Thornton, Clara Thornton. She was breathing hard, her words coming in gasps. I need your help. Josiah lowered the rifle. What happened? A man came, Virgil Cobb. Says he owns the land where we're staying. Says we have a week to leave or he'll force us out. Josiah's expression darkened. Cobb. You know him? I know of him. Land speculator. Been buying up territory all through these mountains. Bullying folks off claims they've worked for years. Josiah leaned the rifle against the doorframe. He's bad news. I can't leave that cave. I got nowhere else to go. No husband? No family? Clara's jaw tightened. My husband left us to die 3 months ago. Drove off with everything we owned and never looked back. Something shifted in Josiah's face. Recognition, maybe. Understanding. Samuel, he said to the boy, go inside. But Pa, inside, now. The boy disappeared into the cabin, casting curious glances over his shoulder. Josiah stepped off the porch and walked toward Clara. He stopped a few feet away, close enough to talk quietly. You're the woman from the cave, the one I've been leaving supplies for. Yes. Why'd you never say nothing? Never ask for help before? Clara met his eyes. Because every man I ever trusted let me down. My father died when I was 15. My husband abandoned me and my daughter in the middle of nowhere. I stopped believing in help a long time ago. What changed? My daughter. Clara's voice cracked. She's scared. She's 7 years old and she's scared, and I can't protect her alone. Not from men like Cobb. Josiah was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. Come inside. Warm up. We'll figure this out together. Clara hesitated. Crossing that threshold meant accepting help, meant trusting someone again. But Rosie's face floated in her memory. She followed Josiah into the cabin. Samuel sat at a rough wooden table, his whittling forgotten. He stared at Clara with undisguised curiosity. "You're the cave lady." "Samuel," Josiah warned. "It's fine." Clara almost smiled. "Yes, I'm the cave lady." "Pa says you're braver than most men." "I don't know about that." "He says you made fire with just sticks and your hands." "I did." Samuel's eyes went wide with admiration. "Can you teach me?" "Samuel, enough." Josiah gestured to a chair. "Sit down, Mrs. Thornton. Tell me everything Cobb said." Clara sat. The warmth of the cabin seeped into her bones. Real warmth, from a real fire in a real stove. She'd forgotten what it felt like to be truly comfortable. She told Josiah everything. The paper Cobb had shown her, the threat, the deadline. When she finished, Josiah leaned back in his chair. "Cobb's been pulling this trick all over the territory. Shows up with official-looking documents, threatens folks, scares them off land he wants. Half the time his claims ain't even legal." "How do you know?" "Because he tried it with me 2 years ago. I told him to go to hell." "What happened?" "He sent men. 3 of them." Josiah's eyes went hard. "They didn't send anyone else after that." Clara studied him. The broad shoulders, the calloused hands, the rifle leaning against the wall. "You're telling me you fought off 3 men?" "I'm telling you I defended my home. My son's home." He leaned forward. "And I'll help you defend yours, if you let me." "Why? You don't owe me nothing." "No, but I know what it's like to face trouble alone. And I know my wife would have wanted me to help someone in your position." He paused. "Besides, Samuel's been asking about your daughter every day for a month. Reckon it's time they met." Clara's resistance crumbled. She was tired. Tired of fighting alone. Tired of carrying every burden on her own shoulders. "Okay," she said quietly. "Okay?" "Okay. I'll accept your help." Josiah nodded. "First thing, we need to find out if Cobb's claim is legitimate. There's a land office in Helena. I can ride there, check the records." "That's a long way." 4 days there and back, if the weather holds." "What do I do while you're gone?" "You stay in the cave. Keep your head down. If Cobb comes back before I return, don't engage him. Don't give him any excuse to act." "And if he acts anyway?" Josiah stood and crossed to a cabinet. He pulled out a pistol, old but well-maintained, and held it out to her. "You know how to use one of these?" "My father taught me." "Good." He pressed the gun into her hands. "Don't use it unless you have to, but if you have to, don't hesitate." Clara felt the weight of the weapon. It was heavier than she remembered. "Thank you," she said. The words felt strange in her mouth. "Don't thank me yet. Thank me when Cobb's gone and your home is safe." He walked her back to the cave that afternoon, Samuel trailing behind with a pack full of supplies. The boy chattered the whole way, about his dog that had died last winter, about the book he was teaching himself to read, about how his pa had promised to take him fishing when the ice melted. "Does your daughter like fishing?" he asked Clara. I don't know. She's never been. I could teach her, if she wanted. Clara looked at this earnest boy with his father's eyes and his mother's memory. I think she'd like that. When they reached the cave, Rosie came running out. She stopped short at the sight of strangers. It's okay, sweet girl. Clara held out her hand. These are our neighbors. This is Mr. McAllister and his son Samuel. Rosie studied them with the careful wariness she'd learned over the past months. You're the one who left the boots, she said to Josiah. I am. They fit perfect. I'm glad. Rosie turned to Samuel. You're 9? Yes, ma'am. I'm 7. I know. My pa told me. They stared at each other, two lonely children in the middle of nowhere, sizing each other up the way children do. Do you want to see my rabbit skins? Rosie asked finally. Yes, ma'am. They disappeared into the cave together. Josiah watched them go, a faint smile on his weathered face. Samuel hasn't had a friend his own age in 3 years, he said quietly. Neither has Rosie. Seems like maybe that's about to change. Clara didn't answer. She wasn't ready to hope for something as fragile as friendship. But watching her daughter lead Samuel into their home, their cave, their shelter, the place they'd built from nothing, she felt something crack open in her chest. Something that might have been hope, after all. Josiah left for Helena the next morning. Clara watched him ride away until he disappeared over the ridge, then turned back to the cave where 2 children sat by the fire, talking and laughing as if they'd known each other their whole lives. Mama? Rosie looked up. Can Samuel stay? Clara looked at the boy, his earnest face, his too big coat, his obvious joy at having someone to play with. For a little while, she said, just until his pa gets back. 4 days. That's how long Josiah had said it would take. Clara prayed Cobb would wait that long. He didn't. On the 3rd day, Clara heard horses. She grabbed the pistol Josiah had given her and positioned herself at the cave entrance. 3 riders emerged from the trees, Cobb in front, 2 larger men behind him. Mrs. Thornton, Cobb called out. I believe I said 1 week, but I find myself with time on my hands. Clara raised the pistol. Get off my land. Cobb laughed. Your land? My dear woman, you have no land. You have nothing. I have this gun, and I know how to use it. Against 3 men? Cobb shook his head. I admire your spirit, truly, but let's be realistic. He dismounted and took a step toward the cave. Clara cocked the pistol. 1 more step, and I'll put a hole in you. Cobb stopped. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across his face. You're bluffing. Try me. From inside the cave, Clara heard Rosie whimper. Samuel whispered something. Reassurance, probably, though Clara couldn't make out the words. She couldn't let Cobb near those children. Last warning, she said. Ride away now, or I start shooting. Cobb studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled. We'll be back, Mrs. Thornton, with more men and legal authority. He mounted his horse. Enjoy your cave while you can. He rode away, his men following. Clara stood in the entrance until she couldn't hear hoofbeats anymore. Then her legs gave out, and she sat down hard in the snow. Mama! Rosie came running out. I'm okay, sweet girl. Clara pulled her daughter close with one arm, the pistol still clutched in the other. I'm okay. But she wasn't okay. Cobb would be back. With more men. With legal authority. And Josiah was still a day away. Clara looked at the sky, heavy with clouds that promised more snow. 1 more day. She just had to survive 1 more day. The snow started falling at midnight and didn't stop. Clara sat by the fire, pistol in her lap, watching the entrance while the children slept. Every sound made her flinch. The crack of a branch, the howl of wind, the settling of stones. She'd never felt so alone in her life. Rosie coughed in her sleep. A small sound, barely noticeable. Clara turned to check on her daughter and felt the first cold finger of fear trace down her spine. Rosie's face was flushed, her breathing shallow. When Clara pressed a hand to her forehead, heat radiated from the skin like fire from coals. "No," Clara whispered. "No, no, no." She'd seen fever take children before. On the farm in Ohio, 3 of her cousins had died in a single week when the sickness came through. She remembered her aunt's screams, remembered the tiny coffins. "Rosie," Clara shook her daughter gently. "Rosie, wake up." Rosie's eyes fluttered open. They were glassy, unfocused. "Mama? I don't feel good." "I know, sweet girl, I know." Samuel stirred on the other side of the fire. "Mrs. Thornton, what's wrong?" "Rosie's sick." Clara's voice came out steadier than she felt. "I need you to keep the fire going. Can you do that?" "Yes, ma'am." Samuel sat up, suddenly alert. "Is she going to be okay?" Clara couldn't answer that question honestly. Just keep the fire going. She worked through the night, doing everything she knew to do. Cold cloths on Rosie's forehead, warm broth made from the last of the rabbit meat, prayers whispered in the darkness. Nothing helped. By morning, Rosie's fever had climbed higher. She'd stopped responding to Clara's voice, lost in whatever nightmares the sickness brought. "Mama," she mumbled. "Mama, the snow is inside me." "Hush, sweet girl, hush." "It's so cold, Mama. Why is it so cold?" Clara pulled her daughter close, trying to warm her with body heat alone. Tears streamed down her face. She was losing her. "Mrs. Thornton," Samuel appeared at her elbow. "My pa knows medicine, some anyway, and there's a woman who lives on the other side of the ridge, Martha Redbird. She knows about herbs and healing." Clara looked at the boy through blurred vision. "Your pa ain't back yet." "I could go get Mrs. Redbird." "You're 9 years old. I can't send you out in a blizzard." "I know the way. Done it twice with Pa." Samuel's jaw set with determination that reminded Clara painfully of Rosie. "She can help. I know she can." Clara looked at her daughter's flushed face, at her shallow breathing, at the life slowly draining away. "Go," she said. "Go fast." Samuel grabbed his coat and was gone before Clara could change her mind. The hours that followed were the longest of Clara's life. She talked to Rosie constantly, even though her daughter couldn't hear her. She told stories about the farm, about Patches the barn cat, about summers in Ohio when the corn grew so tall you could get lost in it. "Remember when I told you about the runts?" Clara's voice cracked. "The kittens nobody wanted? I saved them, Rosie, every single one. And I'm going to save you too. You hear me? I'm going to save you." Rosie didn't respond. Clara rocked her daughter and prayed to a God she wasn't sure she believed in anymore. The sound of footsteps made her grab the pistol. "Mrs. Thornton? It's Samuel. I brought help." Clara nearly collapsed with relief. A woman pushed through the entrance, older, maybe 60, with silver-streaked dark hair and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. She carried a leather bag that clinked with bottles and pouches. "I'm Martha Redbird," she said. "Let me see the child." Clara reluctantly released Rosie into the woman's care. Martha's hands moved with practiced efficiency, checking pulse, examining eyes, pressing gently on the throat. "How long has she been like this?" "Since last night. She just kept getting worse." Martha opened her bag and began pulling out items: dried herbs, small bottles, a stone mortar and pestle. "Lung fever," she said. "Seen it 100 times. Dangerous if you don't treat her right, but treatable. She's gonna live? Martha looked up, her dark eyes meeting Clara's. If you do exactly what I tell you, she's got a good chance. Anything. I'll do anything. Martha worked for hours. She brewed teas from herbs Clara couldn't identify, made poultices that smelled sharp and medicinal, forced tiny sips of liquid between Rosie's cracked lips. Clara watched every movement, memorizing everything. You've done well, Martha said during a lull, keeping her warm, keeping her hydrated. Most folks panic and make things worse. I couldn't panic. She's all I have. Martha studied Clara with those knowing eyes. Samuel told me about you. The woman in the cave. The one who made fire from nothing and faced down Virgil Cobb with a pistol. I did what I had to do. That's what strong women always say. Martha returned to her work. I was married once. Shoshone man. Good man. Died in a mining accident 20 years ago. Left me with nothing but the clothes on my back and the knowledge in my head. What did you do? Same as you. Survived. Built something from nothing. Martha ground herbs with smooth, practiced motions. This territory is hard on women, but the women who make it through are harder. Near midnight, Rosie's fever finally broke. Clara felt the moment it happened, the heat radiating from her daughter's skin suddenly easing, the shallow breathing becoming deeper, more regular. Rosie's eyes opened, and this time they were clear. "Mama?" Clara sobbed. She couldn't help it. The relief was too enormous to contain. "I'm here, sweet girl. I'm here. I had bad dreams." "I know, but you're safe now. You're safe." Martha packed up her bag with quiet efficiency. "She'll need rest, lots of fluids. Keep her warm, but not too warm. I'll come back in 2 days to check on her." Clara caught the woman's arm. "Thank you. I don't know how to repay you." "You don't owe me nothing." Martha's weathered face softened. "Women help women out here. It's how we survive. I've been surviving alone for months." "I know, but you don't have to anymore." Martha squeezed Clara's hand. "That man, Josiah McAllister, he's a good man, one of the few. His wife was my friend before she passed. He's been kind to us. He sees something in you, something worth protecting." Martha pulled on her coat. "Don't push him away because some other man hurt you. That ain't fair to him or to yourself." She left before Clara could respond. Samuel had fallen asleep by the fire, exhausted from his trek through the blizzard. Clara covered him with a rabbit fur and returned to Rosie's side. "Mama?" Rosie's voice was weak but present. "Who was that lady?" "A friend. A new friend." "We have friends now?" Clara thought of Josiah, of Samuel, of Martha Redbird. People who'd helped her without asking for anything in return. "Yes, sweet girl, we have friends." Rosie smiled, the first real smile Clara had seen in days, and drifted into peaceful sleep. Clara stayed awake, watching her daughter breathe, letting the tears fall freely. She'd almost lost everything. Again. But this time, she hadn't been alone. Josiah returned the next afternoon, riding hard through snow that reached his horse's chest. "Clara!" He dismounted before the horse fully stopped. "Samuel, are you—" "Pa!" Samuel came running out of the cave and threw himself into his father's arms. "Rosie got sick, but Mrs. Redbird came and fixed her, and now she's better." Josiah held his son tight, his eyes finding Clara over the boy's head. "You're both okay?" "We're okay." Clara stood at the cave entrance, arms wrapped around herself. "Your son saved my daughter's life. Walked 3 miles through a blizzard to fetch help." Josiah looked down at Samuel with something between pride and terror. "You did what?" "She was dying, Pa. I couldn't just sit there." "You could have died yourself." "But I didn't." Samuel's chin lifted. And now Rosie's going to be fine. Josiah pulled his son close again, holding him like he might never let go. Clara watched them, father and son, bound by love that required no words, and felt something shift in her chest. "Did you find anything?" she asked. "In Helena?" Josiah released Samuel and reached into his saddlebag. He pulled out a folded paper. "Cobb's claim is fraudulent. The land company he represents doesn't exist. Never did. He's been forging documents and bullying people off land so he can stake his own claims later." Clara stared at the paper. "So, he has no right to this land?" "None whatsoever. More than that, there's already a warrant out for his arrest in Wyoming territory. He's wanted for fraud, theft, and assault." Relief flooded through Clara so intensely that her knees went weak. "It's over?" "Not quite." Josiah's expression darkened. "Cobb doesn't know we know. He'll come back, probably with men, expecting you to be unprotected." "Then let him come." Clara's voice hardened. "I'm done running, done hiding. If he wants a fight, I'll give him one." Josiah studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Together, then. We'll face him together." They spent the next day preparing. Josiah helped Clara reinforce the cave entrance, creating defensive positions. Martha Redbird returned, not just to check on Rosie, but with news of her own. "Cobb hired men in town," she said. 6 of them. Hard cases. The kind who don't ask questions as long as the pay's good. "When?" "They were drinking in the saloon last night, bragging about clearing out some squatters today." Clara's stomach tightened. 6 men. "Against 3, Josiah said. Those ain't great odds." 4, Martha corrected. "I ain't letting that snake run decent folks off their land." "You can shoot?" Martha smiled, a fierce expression that transformed her weathered face. "Honey, I've been shooting since before you were born. My husband taught me, and I taught myself to be better." They positioned themselves as the afternoon wore on. Josiah at the cave entrance with his rifle, Clara at a secondary position behind a rock formation, the pistol steady in her hands. Martha somewhere in the trees. Clara couldn't see her, which meant Cobb's men wouldn't either. The children stayed deep in the cave, hidden behind the sleeping platform Clara had built. "Rosie," Clara had knelt before her daughter one final time. "Whatever you hear, whatever happens, you stay hidden. You understand?" "Yes, Mama." "I mean it. Don't come out until I come get you." "What if—" Rosie's voice trembled. "What if you don't come?" Clara cupped her daughter's face. "Then you find Samuel's pa. He'll take care of you." "I don't want anyone else to take care of me. I want you." "I know, sweet girl, and I'm going to do everything I can to come back to you." Clara kissed her daughter's forehead. "But if something happens, you remember, you're strong, stronger than you know. We proved that together, didn't we?" Rosie nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I love you, Rosie Bell." "I love you too, Mama." Clara took her position and waited. They came at sunset. 7 riders this time. Cobb had added another man to his crew. They emerged from the trees in a line, spreading out as they approached the cave. "Mrs. Thornton!" Cobb's voice echoed across the snow. "I brought friends this time, and legal authority." "Your legal authority is garbage!" Clara shouted back. "I know about the forged documents. I know about the warrant in Wyoming." Silence. When Cobb spoke again, his voice had lost its oily confidence. "I don't know what you think you know, but I think I know you're a fraud and a criminal, and I think these men you hired might want to reconsider their employment." One of the riders shifted nervously. "Cobb, what's she talking about?" "Nothing. She's lying. I've got papers from the land office in Helena that say different." Josiah stepped into view, rifle raised. "Papers that say you've been running this scam across 3 territories, Papers that say there's a bounty on your head. More shifting among the riders. Two of them exchanged glances. "This is absurd," Cobb sputtered. "I'm a legitimate businessman." "You're a snake," Clara's voice rang out clear and strong. "And snakes get their heads cut off." $500. The voice came from the trees. Martha, invisible but present. "That's the bounty. Split 7 ways, well, it's more than Cobb's paying you, I'd wager." One of the riders actually laughed. "She's got a point. Enough of this." Cobb pulled a pistol from his coat. "Kill them all. I'll double your pay." For a moment, nobody moved. Then one of the riders, the one who'd laughed, turned his horse. "I ain't dying for you, Cobb, and I sure as hell ain't gonna hang for you." He rode away without looking back. Another rider followed, then a third. Cobb watched his army melt away, his face contorting with rage. "Cowards! All of you!" 3 men remained, either too loyal or too stupid to run. Cobb himself made 4. Better odds now, but still not good. "Last chance," Josiah called. "Ride away, and we'll let you go." Cobb's answer was a gunshot that cracked through the cold air. The bullet went wide, splintering rock near Josiah's head. What happened next happened fast. Martha's rifle spoke from the trees, and one of Cobb's men tumbled from his horse. Josiah returned fire, catching another man in the shoulder. Clara squeezed her trigger and felt the pistol kick. She didn't know if she'd hit anything, but the third man wheeled his horse and fled. Cobb sat alone on his horse, pistol empty, army destroyed. "It's over," Clara said, emerging from cover. "Get off that horse and put your hands where I can see them." Cobb's face twisted with hatred. "You think you've won? You're nothing. A woman squatting in a cave with a bastard child. You think anyone's going to care what happens to you? Shut up. Your husband was right to leave you. You're worthless. I said, shut up." Clara walked toward him, pistol raised, every step steady, despite the rage boiling in her chest. "I've spent 3 months surviving in these mountains. I've made fire from nothing, caught my own food, built shelter with my bare hands, faced down men like you, and won." She stopped 2 feet from his horse. "I am not nothing. I am not worthless. And I will not let you or anyone else tell me different, ever again." Cobb stared at her with something new in his eyes. Fear. "Josiah." Clara didn't look away from Cobb. "You said there's a warrant?" "Yes, ma'am." "Then let's tie him up and take him to town. I want to watch them put him in chains." "With pleasure." They bound Cobb's hands while he cursed and threatened, promises of revenge that grew increasingly desperate and hollow. Martha emerged from the trees, rifle slung over her shoulder, a satisfied smile on her face. "That was some shooting," she said to Clara. "I missed. You scared the hell out of them. That's what mattered." The sun was setting as they prepared to transport Cobb to the nearest town. Clara was checking the ropes on his wrists when she heard hoofbeats approaching from the east. A single rider. She grabbed her pistol, but Josiah caught her arm. "Wait." The rider emerged from the trees, and Clara's blood turned to ice. Emmett. He looked older than she remembered, harder. His fine clothes were travel-stained, his face gaunt beneath a scraggly beard. But it was him. After 3 months, after leaving her and Rosie to die, after everything, it was him. He reined in his horse and stared at the scene before him. The bound prisoner, the armed strangers, his wife with a pistol in her hand. "Clara," his voice was rough, "I came to find you." "Get out." The words came from somewhere deep in Clara's chest, cold and sharp as ice. "Get out and don't come back." "I made a mistake." "A mistake?" Clara laughed, a harsh, broken sound.
You left us to die. You called us mistakes. You took everything we had and drove away without looking back.
I know. I know what I did. Emmett dismounted, hands raised. But I want to make it right.
You can't make this right.
I want to see Rosie. Clara raised the pistol.
You take one more step toward my daughter, and I will put a bullet in you.
She's my daughter, too.
She stopped being your daughter the day you abandoned her.
Josiah moved to stand beside Clara, rifle at the ready. Samuel and Rosie appeared at the cave entrance, drawn by the commotion, despite Clara's instructions. Emmett's eyes fixed on Rosie. She's gotten so big. Don't talk to her. Don't even look at her. Clara, please. You don't get to say please. You don't get to beg. You gave up that right when you drove away. Clara's voice shook, but her aim stayed steady. I spent 3 months building a life for us. 3 months learning to survive without you. And you know what I figured out? Emmett said nothing. We're better off, Rosie and me. We're stronger without you. Happier. Safer. Clara took a breath. So you're going to get back on that horse. You're going to ride away. And you're never going to come near us again. Or what? Or I'll kill you. Clara's eyes were dry. Her heart was cold. I've killed rabbits to keep my daughter fed. I've faced down men with guns. I've survived things you can't even imagine. Killing you would be easy. Emmett stared at her. This woman who'd been his wife, who'd once loved him, who'd followed him across a continent because he asked her to. He didn't recognize her anymore. You've changed, he said quietly. You changed me. A long moment passed. The wind howled. The sun sank lower. Finally, Emmett mounted his horse. I'll contest for custody, he said. In a court. Legally. Try it. Clara's voice was steady. I've got witnesses to your abandonment. I've got people who'll testify to what you did. No court in this territory will give you that child. Emmett's jaw tightened, but he said nothing more. He rode away, disappearing into the trees as the last light faded. Clara watched until she couldn't see him anymore. Then her legs gave out, and she sat down hard in the snow. Mama! Rosie came running, throwing herself into her mother's arms. Clara held her daughter tight, breathing in the smell of her hair, feeling the warmth of her small body. He's gone, sweet girl. He's gone. Is he coming back? I don't know, but if he does, we'll be ready. Josiah knelt beside them, his hand resting gently on Clara's shoulder. You did good, he said quietly. Clara looked up at him, this man who'd shown her kindness when she'd expected cruelty, who'd helped her when she'd refused help, who'd stood beside her when everything she'd built was threatened. Thank you, she said, for everything. We ain't done yet, Josiah nodded toward Cobb, still bound and glaring from his horse. Still gotta deliver this one to justice. Tomorrow. Clara was suddenly exhausted, drained of everything she had. Tonight, I just want to hold my daughter. Josiah nodded. He stood and began organizing things with Martha, securing Cobb, setting up a watch rotation, preparing for the morning's ride to town. Clara sat in the snow with Rosie in her arms, watching the stars emerge one by one. She'd faced down Cobb. She'd faced down Emmett. She'd faced down every fear and challenge the world had thrown at her. And she was still standing. Mama! Rosie's voice was sleepy. Yes, sweet girl? Are we still going to live in the cave? Clara thought about that. She thought about the home she'd built from nothing, the skills she'd learned, the strength she'd discovered in herself. She thought about Josiah and Samuel, about Martha Redbird, about the community that was slowly forming around her, built not from blood, but from choice.
"For now," she said, "but I think things are about to change." "Good change or bad change?"
Clara kissed her daughter's forehead.
"Good change, sweet girl. The best kind."
The ride to Millbrook took most of the next day. Clara sat rigid in the saddle of a horse Josiah had brought for her, keeping Cobb in her sights the entire journey. The man had stopped talking hours ago, his threats and curses giving way to sullen silence. Rosie rode with Samuel on Josiah's horse, the two children whispering and giggling despite everything. Clara marveled at their resilience and how quickly children could find joy even in the aftermath of chaos. "You're thinking too hard." Josiah had fallen back to ride beside her. His voice was quiet, meant only for her ears. "I'm thinking about what happens next." "What do you mean?" "Cobb's going to jail. That's settled. But Emmett..." Clara's jaw tightened. "He said he'd contest for custody. Legally. He abandoned you and your daughter in the wilderness. No judge would. He's got family money, connections, the kind of people who make problems disappear." Clara shook her head. "I've seen it before. Rich men getting away with things that would hang a poor man." Josiah was quiet for a moment. "You're not alone anymore, Clara. Whatever comes, you've got people standing with you." "Why?" "Why what? Why do you care what happens to us? You barely know me." Josiah looked at her, really looked, in that way he had that made Clara feel seen in a way Emmett never had. "Because you remind me of my wife." Clara didn't know what to say to that. "She was like you," Josiah continued. "Strong, stubborn, refused to ask for help even when she needed it." His voice softened. "I couldn't save her from the fever. But maybe I can help save you from whatever's coming." "I don't need saving." "No, ma'am, you don't. But you might need backup." Clara almost smiled. Almost. Millbrook appeared as the afternoon light began to fade. A cluster of buildings huddled against the base of a hill, smoke rising from chimneys, people moving through streets that had been carved from wilderness. Civilization. Clara hadn't seen it in 3 months. It felt strange, foreign, like returning to a place she'd once known but no longer belonged. "Stay close," Josiah murmured. "Let me do the talking at first." They rode into town with Cobb bound between them. People stopped to stare. Whispers rippled through the streets like wind through grass. "That's Cobb. What happened to him? Who are those people with him?" The sheriff's office was a squat wooden building near the center of town. A man emerged as they approached, tall, weathered, with a star pinned to his chest and suspicion in his eyes. "McAllister, what's this about?" "Got a prisoner for you, Sheriff Tucker." Josiah dismounted and handed over the papers from Helena. "Virgil Cobb, wanted in Wyoming territory for fraud, theft, and assault. Been running the same scam here in Montana." Tucker studied the papers, his brow furrowing deeper with each page. "Well, I'll be damned." He looked up at Cobb with disgust. "Heard you were a legitimate businessman." "I am." Cobb struggled against his bonds. "These people are lying. They attacked me on my own property." "That ain't your property," Clara said. "Never was. You forged documents and threatened folks to steal what wasn't yours." Tucker looked at her with new interest. "And you are?" "Clara Thornton. My daughter and I have been living in a cave on Crow's Peak since December. Cobb tried to run us off twice." "A cave?" Tucker's eyebrows rose. "All winter?" "Yes, sir." "Just you and a child?" "Yes, sir." Tucker was silent for a moment. Then he nodded slowly. "Ma'am, I've lived in this territory my whole life. Seen a lot of hard people do a lot of hard things. But a woman surviving a Montana winter in a cave with nothing but her daughter? He shook his head. That's something else entirely. He gestured to his deputy. Lock Cobb up. I'll wire Wyoming and confirm the warrant. As they dragged Cobb toward the jail, he twisted around to glare at Clara. This isn't over. You hear me? This isn't... The door slammed shut, cutting off his threats. Clara let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. It's over, Josiah said quietly. He can't hurt you anymore. One threat down, Clara looked at him. One to go. Word spread fast in the small town. By evening, everyone in Millbrook knew about the woman who'd survived the winter in a cave, who'd faced down Virgil Cobb with a pistol, who'd helped bring a wanted criminal to justice. Clara found herself surrounded by curious townsfolk everywhere she went. Women approached her with questions. How had she made fire? How had she caught food? How had she kept her daughter alive? She answered as best she could, uncomfortable with the attention, but unable to escape it. You're famous, Rosie said that night, from the bed they shared in the town's small boarding house. Josiah had paid for 2 rooms, one for Clara and Rosie, one for himself and Samuel. I don't want to be famous. Why not? Everyone thinks you're brave. Being brave and being smart ain't the same thing. If I'd been smart, I never would have married your papa in the first place. Rosie was quiet for a moment. Do you think he'll come back? Clara pulled her daughter close. I don't know, sweet girl, but if he does, we'll be ready. Mr. McAllister will help us, won't he? I think he will. I like him, Mama, and I like Samuel. I know you do. Do you like him? Mr. McAllister, I mean. Clara didn't answer. She wasn't sure she knew how. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. Clara was breaking fast in the boarding house dining room when 3 women approached her table. She recognized one of them, the sheriff's wife, a sturdy woman named Margaret Tucker, with kind eyes and flour-dusted hands. Mrs. Thornton, mind if we sit? Clara gestured to the empty chairs. Please. The women settled in, exchanging glances that suggested they'd rehearsed what came next. We heard what you did, Margaret began. Surviving the winter, facing down Cobb, all of it. Word travels fast. It does in a town this size. Margaret leaned forward. We also heard your husband might cause trouble. Try to take your daughter. Clara's guard went up. Where'd you hear that? Josiah McAllister. He's worried about you. He shouldn't be. Probably not, but he is anyway. Margaret smiled. That's just his way. One of the other women, younger, with red hair and freckles, spoke up. Thing is, Mrs. Thornton, we've seen this before. Man abandons his family, runs off to do whatever he pleases, then comes back when he feels like it and expects everyone to pretend nothing happened. The law usually sides with the man, the third woman added. Doesn't matter what he's done. He's the husband, the father. He's got rights. Clara's stomach tightened. I know. But here's the thing. Margaret reached across the table and took Clara's hand. The law ain't the only power in a town like this. There's also community. Neighbors who stand up for each other. Women who protect their own. What are you saying? We're saying if your husband shows his face in Millbrook, he'll find a lot of people willing to testify to what kind of man he is. People who never even met him, but know exactly what he did to you and your girl. Why would you do that for me? You don't even know me. Margaret's eyes were steady. Because every woman in this room has known a man like your husband, and we're tired of watching men like that win. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. She blinked them back. Thank you, she managed. Don't thank us yet. Margaret squeezed her hand. Thank us when you're safe. Emmett arrived 3 days later. Clara was helping Rosie practice her letters at a table in the boarding house when the door opened and her husband walked in like he owned the place. He'd cleaned himself up since she'd last seen him. New clothes, trimmed beard, the oily confidence back in his eyes. A man in a suit followed behind him, carrying a leather case. "Clara." Emmett's voice was smooth, controlled. "We need to talk." Clara stood, putting herself between Emmett and Rosie. "Get out." "I have a lawyer this time. Mr. Whitfield here specializes in family matters." Emmett gestured to the suited man. "We can do this civil, or we can do it ugly. Your choice." "My choice is for you to leave." "I'm not leaving without my daughter." "She's not your daughter. Not anymore." Whitfield stepped forward, clearing his throat. "Mrs. Thornton, I understand emotions are running high, but the law is clear. Mr. Thornton has paternal rights. Mr. Thornton abandoned his child in the middle of nowhere to die." Clara's voice cut like a blade. "What kind of paternal rights does that buy?" "Abandonment is a serious accusation." "It's not an accusation. It's a fact. He drove away with everything we owned and left us with nothing but the clothes on our backs." "That's not—" Emmett started. "Don't!" Clara's eyes blazed. "Don't you dare stand there and lie. I was there. Rosie was there. We watched you disappear over that ridge without a single look back." "I came back for you." 3 months later, after we'd survived a winter that should have killed us. You didn't come back because you cared. You came back because you failed at whatever you were running toward and decided we were your backup plan." Emmett's mask slipped, just for a moment. Clara saw the truth underneath, the selfishness, the cowardice, the calculation. "I want my daughter," he said flatly. "You can't have her." "Mr. Whitfield, tell her." The lawyer opened his case and withdrew a document. "Mrs. Thornton, I have here a petition for custody of the minor child, Rosie Bell Thornton. We intend to file this with the territorial court." "File whatever you want." Clara snatched the document and tore it in half. "I'll fight you in every court in this territory. I'll tell everyone what you did. I'll make sure the whole world knows what kind of man you are." "Clara, my name is Mrs. Thornton. You don't get to call me Clara anymore." The door opened again. Josiah walked in, followed by Sheriff Tucker and 3 of the women Clara had met the day before. They spread out across the room, a wall of support that made Emmett take an involuntary step back. "Everything okay here?" Tucker asked, his hand resting on his holster. "This man is threatening to take my daughter." "Is that so?" Tucker turned to Emmett. "And you would be—" "Emmett Thornton, her husband. The one who abandoned her and the child last December?" Emmett's jaw tightened. "That's a mischaracterization, is it?" Tucker pulled a folded paper from his pocket. "Because I've got signed statements from 4 different people saying otherwise, including a mountain trapper who watched you drive away. Said you didn't even slow down when your wife screamed your name." Emmett went pale. "That's— Who told you that?" "Doesn't matter. What matters is I've got evidence of child abandonment." Tucker stepped closer. "Now, I'm not a judge, but I know Judge Harrison pretty well, and I can tell you, he don't look kindly on men who leave their children to die." "I didn't leave her to die." "You left her in the wilderness with no food, no shelter, no way to survive." Clara's voice was steady now, cold as the winter she'd endured. "If that's not leaving her to die, what is it?" Emmett looked around the room, at the hostile faces, the closed ranks, the community that had formed around the woman he'd discarded. "This is ridiculous," Whitfield muttered. "My client has rights." "Your client is lucky I don't throw him in jail right now." Tucker's patience had clearly reached its limit. "I've wired the territorial court about this situation. Until a judge rules otherwise, that child stays with her mother." You try to take her by force, you'll be behind bars before sundown. You can't do that. Try me." Emmett stared at Clara. For a long moment, something ugly flickered in his eyes. Rage, maybe, or the humiliation of a man who'd expected to win and found himself outmaneuvered. "This isn't over," he said finally. "Yes, it is." Clara stepped forward until she was close enough to see the pulse jumping in his throat. "You had your chance. You threw it away. Now you get to live with that for the rest of your life." "Rosie is my blood." "Blood don't mean nothing if you're not willing to bleed for it." Emmett flinched like she'd struck him. "Get out of my sight," Clara said. "And don't come back." He left. Whitfield followed, shooting backward glances that suggested he knew his client's case had just collapsed. Clara stood in the middle of the room, trembling with adrenaline, until Rosie's small hand found hers. "Mama? Is he gone?" Clara knelt and pulled her daughter into a fierce embrace. "He's gone, sweet girl. He's gone." That night, Josiah found Clara on the boarding house porch, wrapped in her rabbit fur cloak, staring at stars she'd learned to navigate by during the long winter months. "Mind some company?" She shifted to make room on the bench. They sat in silence for a while, watching their breath crystallize in the cold air. "You did good today," Josiah said finally. "I was terrified." "Couldn't tell." "I've gotten good at hiding it." Clara pulled the cloak tighter. 3 months ago, I couldn't make fire without cutting my hands to ribbons. Now I face down my husband in front of a room full of people like it's nothing." "It wasn't nothing." "No, it wasn't." She turned to look at him. "Thank you. For being there. For all of it." "I told you. We're neighbors." "Is that what we are?" The question hung between them, heavy with meaning neither of them was quite ready to acknowledge. Josiah was quiet for a long moment. "I've been thinking." "About what?" "About the cave. About you and Rosie staying there through the winter." He paused. "It ain't right. You've got no proper shelter, no supplies for next winter, no—" "I've survived this long." "I know you have. That's not what I mean." Josiah turned to face her fully. "What I mean is, there's land next to mine. Good land, with a creek and timber and space for a proper cabin. It ain't claimed yet." Clara's heart stuttered. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I could help you stake a claim. Build a real home. Somewhere you and Rosie could be safe. Permanent." "Why would you do that?" "Because Samuel needs a friend his own age. Because Martha Redbird is getting too old to live alone and could use neighbors to check on her." Josiah's voice softened. "And because I've spent 5 years raveling around in that cabin with nothing but memories and regret. Might be nice to have something to look forward to for a change." Clara felt tears threatening again. She was so tired of crying. "I can't accept charity. It ain't charity, it's an offer. You'd be working your own land, building your own home, living your own life. I'm just offering to help you get started. And what do you want in return?" Josiah looked at her, really looked, in that way that made her feel like he could see all the broken pieces she'd tried so hard to hide. "Nothing," he said. "Nothing but good neighbors." Clara didn't believe him. Not entirely. There was something in his eyes, something that went deeper than neighborly concern. But for once, that didn't scare her. "I'll think about it," she said. "That's all I'm asking." They sat together in the cold, watching the stars wheel overhead. Two people who'd lost everything finding their way towards something new. The next morning, news came that Judge Harrison would be arriving in 2 weeks to hear cases. Emmett's custody petition would be among them. Clara's stomach knotted at the news, but she forced herself to stay calm. "We'll be ready," Sheriff Tucker assured her. "I've got enough witnesses to fill the courtroom. Every person in this town knows what Emmett did.
That might not matter.
It'll matter to Judge Harrison. Man lost his own daughter to a fever when she was about Rosie's age. He don't tolerate folks who treat children poorly. Clara nodded, but the worry didn't ease. That night, Rosie asked a question Clara had been dreading.
Mama, what if the judge makes me go with Papa?
Clara gathered her daughter close. That's not going to happen.
But what if it does?
Then I'll steal you back. Clara kissed Rosie's forehead. I'll chase you to the ends of the earth. I'll fight every law and every man and every mountain between us. Nobody takes you from me. Nobody.
Promise?
I promise. Rosie was quiet for a moment. Then,
Mama, I don't want to go with Papa.
I know, sweet girl.
I want to stay with you, and Mr. McAllister, and Samuel.
Clara's heart ached. Her daughter was already thinking of Josiah's family as her own.
Is that okay?
Rosie asked, suddenly uncertain.
To want that?
Clara thought about the life she'd imagined when she married Emmett. The farm, the children, the quiet contentment of ordinary days. That dream had died in the snow 3 months ago. But maybe a new dream could grow in its place.
Yeah, sweet girl, she said softly. That's okay.
The days before the hearing passed both too quickly and too slowly. Clara prepared her testimony, rehearsing with Tucker and the townswomen, until she could recite the facts without her voice shaking. She met with a lawyer Margaret had recommended, a young man named Peters, who'd agreed to represent her for a fraction of his usual fee. Your case is strong, Peters told her. Abandonment, endangerment, multiple witnesses. Any reasonable judge would rule in your favor.
And if he's not reasonable?
Peters hesitated. Let's hope he is. Clara also accepted Josiah's offer. She didn't make a big announcement, just found him one evening, helping Samuel with his reading by lamplight, and said,
That land you mentioned, I want to see it.
Josiah looked up, his face carefully neutral. When?
After the hearing, win or lose.
You're going to win.
I know, but after.
He nodded slowly. I'll take you there myself.
Thank you.
Don't thank me yet. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Wait until you see how much work it needs. The morning of the hearing arrived gray and cold. Clara dressed in the best clothes the townswomen had scrounged for her. A simple dark dress, clean and pressed, respectable. She braided Rosie's hair and tied it with a blue ribbon Martha had given her.
You look pretty, Mama. So do you, sweet girl.
The courtroom was packed. Clara hadn't expected that. It seemed like half the town had shown up, filling the benches until people stood along the walls. Emmett sat at the front with his lawyer, looking uncomfortable amid so many hostile faces. He didn't meet Clara's eyes as she took her place across the aisle. Judge Harrison entered, a stern man in his 60s, with white hair and eyes that missed nothing. He took his seat and surveyed the crowded room. This is a custody hearing, not a circus, he said dryly. But since you're all here, I suppose you can stay. Keep quiet. The proceedings began. Whitfield spoke first, laying out Emmett's case with the smooth confidence of a man who got paid by the word. He talked about paternal rights, about the importance of fathers in children's lives, about Emmett's sincere regret for his temporary absence. Clara's hands clenched in her lap, but she stayed silent. Then Peters stood. Your Honor, my client has a different story to tell. A story about survival against impossible odds. About a mother who refused to let her daughter die, even when her own husband left them with nothing. He called witnesses. The mountain trapper who'd seen Emmett drive away. Martha Redbird, who'd saved Rosie's life. Sheriff Tucker, who'd documented Emmett's abandonment. The townswomen, who testified to Clara's character. And finally, Clara herself. She walked to the witness chair on legs that felt like water, sat down, and looked at Judge Harrison. "Mrs. Thornton," Peters said gently, "tell us what happened on December 12th of last year." Clara took a breath, and she told them everything. When she finished, the courtroom was silent. Judge Harrison studied her for a long moment. Then he turned to Emmett. "Mr. Thornton, do you deny any of what Mrs. Thornton has described?" Emmett glanced at Whitfield, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "I don't deny that I left," Emmett said carefully. "But the circumstances were—" "Did you or did you not leave your wife and 7-year-old daughter in the wilderness with no food, no shelter, and no means of survival?" "Yes or no, Mr. Thornton?" Emmett's jaw tightened. "Yes." The word dropped into the silence like a stone into still water. Judge Harrison leaned back in his chair. "I've heard enough." He picked up his gavel. "In the matter of custody of the minor child, Rosie Bell Thornton, I find in favor of the mother, Clara May Thornton. The father's petition is denied. Furthermore, given the evidence of abandonment and endangerment presented here today, I am ordering that Emmett Thornton have no contact with the child unless and until he can demonstrate to this court's satisfaction that he poses no threat to her welfare." The gavel came down. Clara couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't process what had just happened. Then Rosie was in her arms, and Margaret Tucker was hugging them both, and the whole courtroom erupted in cheers and applause. Through the chaos, Clara saw Emmett's face, pale, shocked, defeated. Their eyes met. Clara felt nothing, not triumph, not satisfaction, just an emptiness where her marriage had once been. Emmett turned and walked out of the courtroom without a word. She never saw him again. That evening, the town threw a celebration in Clara's honor. She tried to slip away twice, uncomfortable with the attention, but someone always caught her and pulled her back into the festivities. Music played. Children ran between tables laden with food. Laughter echoed through the cold night air. Josiah found her standing apart from the crowd, watching Rosie and Samuel chase each other around a bonfire. "How do you feel?" "I don't know." Clara shook her head. "Free, I think, for the first time in years." "That's a good way to feel." "Is it? I spent 8 years married to that man. 8 years thinking I knew who he was. Turns out I never knew him at all." Josiah was quiet for a moment. "My wife used to say that people show you who they are eventually. You just have to pay attention." "I wasn't paying attention." "You were surviving." "There's a difference." He turned to face her. "Clara, what Emmett did, that's not your fault. None of it." "I know. My head knows." She touched her chest. "This part is still catching up." Rosie came running over, breathless and laughing. "Mama, Samuel says there's a frozen pond near his cabin, and we can go skating when the ice gets thick enough." "Is that so? Can we go? Please?" Clara looked at Josiah. He raised his hands. "Don't look at me. I just provide the pond." Clara smiled, a real smile, the kind she'd almost forgotten how to make. "We'll see, sweet girl. We'll see." But they all knew the answer was yes. Spring arrived the way hope does, slowly at first, then all at once. Clara stood at the edge of the land Josiah had promised her, watching Rosie and Samuel race through patches of melting snow. The creek he'd mentioned ran clear and cold just beyond a stand of cottonwoods. The timber was good, the soil dark and rich. It was perfect. "What do you think?" Josiah stood beside her, hands in his pockets, trying to look casual. Clara had learned to read him over the past weeks. He was nervous. "I think it's too much. It's unclaimed land. All you have to do is file the paperwork."
That's not what I mean. Clara turned to face him. You've done too much for us already. The food, the help with Cobb, standing with me against Emmett. Now this? I told you, I don't want anything in return. Everybody wants something. Josiah was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. My wife's name was Elizabeth. We called her Beth. She had hair the color of autumn leaves, and a laugh that could make you forget everything bad that ever happened. He paused. When the fever took her, I wanted to die too. Only thing that kept me going was Samuel. Josiah, let me finish. He took a breath. For 5 years, I've been walking through my life like a ghost, going through the motions, keeping Samuel fed and clothed and safe, but not really living. He looked at her. Then I saw the smoke from your cave. Clara's heart was pounding. She didn't know why. I could have ignored it, Josiah continued, told myself it wasn't my business. But something made me walk up that ridge. Something made me leave those supplies. His voice softened. And when I saw you standing in that cave entrance, pistol in your hand, ready to fight the whole world for your daughter, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. What? Hope. The word hung between them, fragile as new ice. I'm not asking for anything, Josiah said. I'm not expecting anything. But if you're asking what I want, he met her eyes. I want to see what happens next. With you. With us. Whatever that turns out to be. Clara didn't trust her voice. Didn't trust herself. She'd sworn she'd never let another man close. Never let herself be vulnerable again. Emmett had taught her that trust was a weapon people used against you. But Josiah wasn't Emmett. I need time, she said finally. I've got time. I might never be ready. That's okay too. You'd wait? Not knowing if... Clara. Josiah stepped closer. Close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his brown eyes. I've been alone for 5 years. A few more months, a few more years don't matter. What matters is that you're here, that you survived, that maybe, just maybe, we both get a second chance. Clara felt tears threatening. She was so tired of crying. But these tears were different. These tears felt like spring. Okay, she whispered. Okay? Okay. I'll stay. I'll build here. And we'll see what happens. Josiah's smile transformed his weathered face. For a moment, he looked like a different man. Younger, lighter, unburdened. That's all I'm asking. Building the cabin took 3 months. Clara insisted on doing most of the work herself, though she accepted help when pride would have been stupid. Josiah taught her to notch logs. Martha Redbird showed her how to mix clay for chinking. Even Sheriff Tucker rode out twice to lend his back to the heavy lifting. The whole town seemed invested in Clara's success. You're a symbol, Margaret Tucker told her one afternoon while they hung washing on a line stretched between 2 trees. Folks around here have been pushed around by men like Cobb for years. Watching you stand up to him, win against your husband, it gives them courage. I didn't do it for them. Doesn't matter. You did it, and they saw it. That's enough. Rosie thrived as the weather warmed. She'd lost the pinched, hungry look she'd worn all winter. Her laughter came easier now, her smiles more frequent. She and Samuel had become inseparable, exploring the woods together, building forts, inventing games that seemed to have rules only they understood. She's happy, Martha observed one evening, watching the children chase fireflies in the dusk. Really happy, not just surviving. I know. Clara sat on the half-finished porch of her cabin, hands still rough from the day's work. Sometimes I can't believe it.
Believe it. You earned this.
Did I? Sometimes I feel like I just stumbled into it. Like luck more than anything.
Martha snorted.
Luck? Child, I watched you make fire with bloody hands and nothing but stubborn will. I watched you face down armed men with a pistol you barely knew how to shoot. I watched you stand in front of a judge and tell the truth, even though it must have torn you apart. She shook her head. That ain't luck. That's strength. Clara didn't argue, but privately, she still wondered. Had she really changed? Or was she just the same woman who'd followed Emmett West, desperate for love, willing to ignore warning signs because she wanted so badly to believe? The answer came on a June evening, when she least expected it. Clara was checking the rabbit snares she still maintained, old habits died hard, when she heard hoofbeats approaching through the trees. Her hand went to the knife at her belt. The pistol was back at the cabin, too far to reach. A rider emerged from the shadows. Clara's blood ran cold. Not Emmett. Worse. A man she didn't recognize, but whose face she knew instinctively. The same weak chin, the same calculating eyes, the same cruel set to the mouth. Emmett's brother, Richard. Mrs. Thornton. Richard reined in his horse, but didn't dismount. I've been looking for you. Get off my land. Your land? Richard laughed. My brother told me you'd become difficult. Your brother abandoned me and my daughter to die.
I'd call that more than difficult. Emmett made mistakes. He knows that now. Richard's voice took on an oily, reasonable tone that made Clara's skin crawl. He sent me to make amends. There's no amends for what he did. Perhaps not, but there could be compensation. Clara went still. What are you talking about? Money, Mrs. Thornton. A great deal of it. Richard reached into his coat and withdrew an envelope. Emmett has done well for himself in California. He's prepared to offer you a substantial sum in exchange for... No. You haven't heard the amount. I don't need to hear it. Clara's voice was steady, cold. He's not buying his way back into Rosie's life. That's not what he's asking for. Richard's smile made her stomach turn. He's asking you to sign a document releasing him from all paternal obligations. In exchange, you receive $5,000 and his promise never to contact you or the child again. Clara stared at him. $5,000. More money than she'd ever seen in her life. Enough to build a real house, buy livestock, set Rosie up for a secure future. All she had to do was sign away her daughter's birthright. He's that desperate to be rid of us? He's moved on. New wife, new life. The past is inconvenient. Of course. Emmett had found someone else, someone who didn't know what kind of man he really was. And now he wanted to erase Clara and Rosie like they'd never existed. No. Richard's smile faltered. Mrs. Thornton, be reasonable. I said no. Clara stepped forward, her hand still on her knife. You go back to your brother and tell him this. Rosie is my daughter. Mine, not his. He gave up any claim to her when he drove away and left us to die. And no amount of money in the world will change that. You're making a mistake. No, I'm making a choice. The same choice I've made every day since he abandoned us. Clara's eyes were hard as flint. I choose my daughter. I choose our life. And I choose to never let a Thornton man have power over us again. Richard's face darkened. You'll regret this. I doubt it. For a long moment, they stared at each other. The desperate woman who'd become something else entirely, and the man who'd expected her to fold like all the other obstacles in his family's path. Richard broke first. Fine. He shoved the envelope back into his coat. Keep your pride. Keep your poverty. But don't come crying to Emmett when things get hard. I'd rather freeze to death in a cave than ask that man for anything. That can be arranged. Is that a threat? Richard's horse shifted nervously, sensing the tension. Just an observation. Montana winters are brutal. Accidents happen. Clara pulled her knife. Get off my land, now. And if I ever see you or your brother again, I won't bother with warnings. Richard looked at the knife, then at the woman holding it. Something in Clara's eyes must have convinced him she meant every word. He turned his horse and rode away without looking back. Clara stood in the fading light, knife still drawn, heart pounding. She'd done it again, stood her ground, refused to break. But her hands were shaking. "Mama?" She spun. Rosie stood at the edge of the trees, eyes wide. "Sweet girl, what are you doing here?" "Samuel and I were playing. I heard voices." Rosie's face was pale. "Who was that man?" Clara sheathed her knife and pulled her daughter close. "Nobody important." "He looked mean." "He was mean. But he's gone now, and he's not coming back." "Are you sure?" Clara thought about Richard's threat, about Emmett's money and connections, about all the ways powerful men could make problems for women who defied them. Then she thought about the community that had formed around her, the sheriff who'd stood in her corner, the townswomen who'd testified on her behalf, Martha and Josiah, and all the others who'd become something like family. "I'm sure," she said. "We're not alone anymore, Rosie. We've got people who'll stand with us." "Like Mr. McAllister?" "Like Mr. McAllister." Rosie was quiet for a moment. Then, "Mama, I think Mr. McAllister loves you." Clara's heart stuttered. "What makes you say that?" "The way he looks at you, like you're the sun coming up." Rosie tilted her head. "Do you love him?" It was a question Clara had been avoiding for weeks, months maybe. "I don't know," she said honestly. "I thought I loved your papa once, and look how that turned out." "Mr. McAllister isn't papa." "No, he's not." "So maybe loving him would be different." Clara looked at her daughter, this wise, brave, impossible child who'd survived everything the world had thrown at them. "Maybe it would," she said softly. She told Josiah about Richard's visit that night. They sat on her finished porch. The cabin was nearly complete now, solid and snug and entirely her own. The children were inside, supposedly sleeping, though whispers and giggles suggested otherwise. "He threatened you?" "Implied more than threatened, but yes." Josiah's jaw tightened. "I'll talk to Tucker. Give him to put the word out. If either of them shows their face in the territory—" "Josiah." Clara put her hand on his arm. "Stop." "Stop what?" "Stop trying to protect me." "Clara, I've been protecting myself for months. I faced down Cobb. I faced down Emmett. I can face down his brother, too." She squeezed his arm. "I don't need a man to fight my battles." "I know you don't need it, but maybe—" Josiah covered her hand with his own. "Maybe you could let someone help anyway. Not because you're weak, but because you don't have to be strong alone anymore." Clara looked at their joined hands. His were rough from work, scarred from years of survival, just like hers. "I spent 8 years with a man who made me feel small," she said quietly, "who took and took and took until there was nothing left. I swore I'd never let that happen again." "I would never." "I know you wouldn't." She met his eyes. "That's what scares me." "Why?" "Because I want to trust you. I want to believe this is real. And every time I let myself hope,
That little voice in my head says I'm making the same mistake I made before." Josiah was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was gentle. "What would it take to convince you this is different?" Clara thought about it. Really thought. "Time," she said finally. "More time. And," she hesitated. "And maybe you could court me. Properly. The way it should have been done the first time." Josiah's face broke into a smile. The real one. The one that made him look 10 years younger. "You want me to court you? Is that ridiculous?" "No, ma'am. That's the least ridiculous thing I've heard in years." He stood and offered her his hand.
"Clara May Thornton, would you do me the honor of allowing me to call on you? Properly. With flowers and everything." Clara laughed. A real laugh. The kind she'd forgotten she was capable of. "Yes," she said, taking his hand. "I would." The summer passed like a dream Clara was afraid to wake from. Josiah courted her with patience and persistence. He brought wildflowers from the meadow. He carved a jewelry box for Rosie. He helped finish the cabin without ever making Clara feel like she owed him anything. They ate dinners together, the four of them, Clara and Rosie and Josiah and Samuel. And slowly, inevitably, they became something that felt like family. "Are you and Pa gonna get married?" Samuel asked one evening, with the blunt directness of childhood. The adults froze. The children watched with curious eyes. "Samuel," Josiah started. "It's a fair question." Clara set down her fork. "And I don't have a good answer." "Why not?" "Because marriage is a big decision, And you Pa and I are still figuring things out." "What's there to figure out?" Samuel's brow furrowed. "You like each other. We like each other. We already eat dinner together every night. Might as well make it official." Rosie nodded emphatically. "He's right, Mama." Clara looked at Josiah. He looked at her. "Out of the mouths of babes," he murmured. "They're not wrong." "No, they're not." Josiah set down his own fork. "Clara, I know we said we'd take our time. And I meant it. I'll wait as long as you need. But Samuel's got a point. We're already living like a family. We just haven't put a name to it yet." Clara's heart pounded. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," Josiah took a breath, "I'm saying I love you. I've loved you since the first time I saw you standing in that cave entrance, ready to fight the whole world. And I hope, you feel something similar." The children were holding their breath. Clara could feel their eyes on her. "I do," she said quietly. "I didn't want to. I tried not to. But I do." Josiah's face lit up. But I'm not ready to marry you." The light dimmed. The children's faces fell. "Not yet," Clara added quickly. "I need more time, to be sure. To know that this is real and not just two lonely people clinging to each other." "How long?" "I don't know. A year, maybe. Maybe less." She reached across the table and took his hand. "Can you wait that long?" Josiah looked at their joined hands, at the children watching with hopeful eyes, at the woman who'd survived everything life had thrown at her, and somehow come out stronger. "I'd wait forever," he said. Clara believed him. Autumn arrived with a letter. Clara recognized the handwriting immediately. Her sister Ruth, the only family she had left in Ohio. They'd written sporadically over the years, but Clara had been too ashamed to tell Ruth the truth about Emmett, about the abandonment, about any of it. Until now. She sat on her porch, on her land, in front of her cabin, and read Ruth's words with tears streaming down her face. "Dear Clara, I received your letter with joy and relief. We had heard rumors, terrible rumors,
about Emmett, and feared the worst. To know that you're alive, that Rosie is thriving, that you've built a new life from nothing, it fills my heart to bursting. You always were the strongest of us, Clara May. Even when we were girls fighting over chores and ribbons, I knew you had iron in your spine. I'm glad the world finally sees what I've always known. Your sister, Ruth. Clara read the letter 3 times. Then she walked to Josiah's cabin. What's wrong? He met her at the door, alarm on his face. Is Rosie? Rosie's fine. Everyone's fine. Clara thrust the letter into his hands. Read this. He read it. When he looked up, his eyes were soft. She sounds like a good sister. She is. She always was. Clara took the letter back, folding it carefully.
I was ashamed, Josiah, for years. Ashamed of my marriage, my choices, my failure. I couldn't tell her the truth.
And now?
Now I'm not ashamed anymore.
Clara looked at him.
I survived. I built something. I found people who care about me and whom I care about in return.
She took a breath.
I found you.
Josiah didn't speak. He just pulled her close and held her. They stood like that for a long time. 2 people who'd lost everything, finding their way back to something that felt like home. The first snow fell on a November evening. Clara stood at her window, watching the flakes drift down, the same way they had a year ago, when she'd stood in the wilderness with nothing but a thin blanket and her daughter's hand in hers. So much had changed.
Mama?
Rosie appeared at her elbow, a cup of hot cider in her small hands.
Mr. McAllister says we should come for dinner. He's making stew.
Is he now?
Samuel helped.
Then it should be interesting. Rosie giggled.
That's what Martha said too. Clara took the cider and sipped it, feeling the warmth spread through her chest. Rosie? Yes, Mama? Do you remember the cave?
Rosie's face sobered.
Sometimes. In my dreams.
Are they bad dreams?
Not anymore.
Rosie leaned against her mother's side.
I used to dream about the cold, about being hungry, about Papa driving away.
She paused.
Now I dream about the fire you made, about how brave you were, about how we survived together.
Clara pulled her daughter close.
I've been thinking, she said. About what? About Mr. McAllister. About his question.
Rosie looked up, eyes bright.
Really? Really. I think...
Clara took a breath.
I think I'm ready.
Rosie's whoop of joy could probably be heard 3 counties over. Clara found Josiah in his kitchen, Samuel at his elbow, both of them attempting to salvage what looked like a culinary disaster. I told you to stir it, Josiah was saying.
I did stir it. You were supposed to keep stirring. Josiah. He turned, saw Clara in the doorway, saw something in her face that made him go very still.
Samuel, he said quietly,
take Rosie outside for a minute.
But the stew. The stew is already ruined. Go. The children left, casting curious glances over their shoulders. Josiah and Clara stood alone in the warm kitchen, firelight dancing on the walls, the smell of burned stew hanging in the air.
You look like you've got something to say, Josiah said.
I do.
Good something or bad something?
Clara walked toward him, stopped close enough to see the hope warring with fear in his eyes. You asked me once if I could let someone help me, she said. Not because I was weak, but because I didn't have to be strong alone. I remember. I wasn't ready then. I was still too scared, too hurt, too convinced that trusting someone would only lead to more pain. She reached up and touched his face. I'm not scared anymore,
Josiah's breath caught. What are you saying? I'm saying yes. Yes? Yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I'll build a life with you. Yes, I'll let you help me carry the weight. Clara smiled through tears she didn't try to hide. Yes to everything. Josiah kissed her. It wasn't a dramatic kiss, the kind from the romance novels Clara's sisters used to read. It was gentle and warm and real, a promise rather than a passion. When they broke apart, the children were watching from the doorway, grinning like they'd won a prize. "Does this mean we're really going to be a family now?" Samuel asked. "Yes," Clara said. "It does." Rosie launched herself at Josiah, wrapping her arms around his waist. "I told Mama you looked at her like she was the sun coming up." Josiah laughed, a full, free sound that Clara had rarely heard from him. "She is," he said. "She absolutely is." They were married on Christmas Eve. The whole town turned out, crowding into the small church until people stood in the aisles and pressed against the walls. Clara wore a dress Margaret Tucker had sewn for her. Simple, white cotton, nothing fancy, but it was hers. Martha Redbird stood as her witness. Samuel stood as his father's. And Rosie. Rosie stood between them, holding both their hands, the bridge that connected two broken families into one whole. "Do you, Clara May Thornton, take this man?" "I do." "Do you, Josiah?" "I do." The preacher smiled. "Then by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife." The church erupted in cheers. Clara kissed her husband, and felt something she'd stopped believing in a long time ago. Joy. That night, after the celebration had wound down and the children were finally asleep, Clara and Josiah stood on the porch of what was now their cabin, watching the snow fall soft and silent. "A year ago tonight," Clara said, "I was huddled in a cave with my daughter, wondering if we'd survive until morning. And now? Now I have a home, a family, a future." She leaned against him. "Everything I thought Emmett had taken from me." "He didn't take anything. He threw it away." Josiah wrapped his arm around her. "And I picked it up." "Lucky you." "Luckiest man in Montana." Clara laughed. It felt good to laugh. It felt good to feel good. "Josiah?" "Thank you for not giving up, for seeing something in me worth saving." "I didn't save you, Clara. You saved yourself." He kissed the top of her head. "I just had the good sense to stand back and watch." They stood together in the snow, two people who'd lost everything, finding in each other something neither had dared to hope for. Inside, the fire burned steady and warm. Inside, two children slept peacefully, dreaming of the family they'd become. Inside, there was love. And outside, the snow kept falling. Not cold anymore, not threatening, just beautiful. Just winter, making way for spring. Clara May Thornton, Clara May McAllister now, closed her eyes and breathed in the cold, clean air of the mountains that had tested her, nearly broken her, and ultimately made her whole. A year ago, Emmett had called her a mistake. He was wrong. She was a survivor, a mother, a wife. She was exactly where she was meant to be.